You've been in the business of death. What do you think about when it comes to your own? And you know the business, you know the emotions, you know the drama.
Yeah.
Have you given any thought, since you now have this vault of experiences of seeing how we folks behave? What's your own sensibility about death?
I have told my kids, I don't know that I have a preference about how they do it, but I have told my children to do it the way it would be the easiest for them to work through it.
African Americans, they more and more, and they celebrate funerals more. They're more, I hate to use the word lively, but they're just more, it's more life into a funeral, more celebration type funeral.
These are people I've known all my life, Robert. Some of the finest people that ever walked on the face of the earth. And they are more vocal, not only in their worship, but in their grieving and funerals too. They don't keep it in, they get it out. And it's a different, their music is obviously different, but it's a, I guess a good way to say it is, it's less traditional, but it's the way they want it. And you understand that. Yeah, because you were supposed to do it a certain way. Now, if you didn't, something was wrong with you. You know, you just didn't do it right. They had a night before visitation. They used to sit up all night.
My dad, I remember one thing that changed about the funeral service. I remember growing up that on black funerals, we used to leave the casket open during the whole funeral growing up. But now we close it at the beginning or we open it at the end. It's not open during the whole service, but growing up, it used to be open during, and they used to also leave the bodies in the church overnight. If we had a visitation like the previous night before, they would leave the body in the church and then come.
My dad was kind of an innovator getting rid of that. He would just say, you know, what have you gained by coming over and sitting up all night with somebody? Who's going to sit up with them out in the cemetery after we bury them?
But death is not a respecter of person, is it?
Say it one more time.
Death is not a respecter of person.
No, it's not. It's not. Death can anybody. Nobody's immune to death. It can happen at any time or place, time, ages, color, creed. It doesn't matter.
If in fact I'm telling you the truth, and I am, and I feel like I do about people, anybody ought to realize in this business is that we're all human. Past that point, it makes no difference. We are all human. We all breathe. We eat. We screw up. We make mistakes. There are no boundaries to death. And by me doing this as long as I have, and my father started me as young as I did, and me seeing people on their knees crying and couldn't control emotions, whatever race, color, size, it just always hung in my mind. There's not any difference in us. When I speak on death and dying to groups, that's the most frequent question I'm asked. I don't know what to say when I go to a funeral. And my answer, it's a pat answer every time. I say, I'm going to give you some advice. First of all, don't say too much. Yeah, you'll have a lot of people around you at the time, but when the reality sets in is when all of them are gone and it comes down to you dealing with it. When my dad died, Robert, we buried him. For 3 weeks after we buried my father were 3 of the busiest weeks I've ever had here, and I just sat down one day and I thought, you know, my dad's dead and I hadn't dealt with my own grief. The night I got off of his funeral, I had another funeral that day, had his funeral that day. I sat down at home that night, and Dr. Thurman called me about 7 o'clock and said, David, I know you buried your daddy today, but Mrs. Smothers has died over here on K Street. That's who it was. So I got up and went on K Street. And you know, I got caught up in all of that emotion of it, and then I thought about 3 or 4 weeks later, I said, I hadn't even dealt with my grief. And people that don't make a mistake. But the first 21 years of my life, I lived in this building. And it wasn't a normal environment, obviously, but it was my environment. It was home to me. Unlike other homes, the kitchen was here. I took baths here, I slept here. You know, it was home. But it was a different kind of house. It was a business being run in it every day. And when I would go to, I've told every one of them, and this is just Undertaker talk, I said, look, when you go through this process here and you walk out of that cemetery when it's over, I don't want you to feel like you've been through the 10-item list or line at Walmart, that I've pushed you through here, or if I put you where you're not comfortable, turn around and tell me. A friend of mine, his name was Tittle Byers, his nickname Tittle, had ruptured appendix, got easy, didn't realize it, and he died. And my bedroom was back in the back then. I was laying back there asleep one night, and I heard my dad come in through the back door with a stretcher. And I hollered at him, and I asked him who had died. He said, Tittle. That's all he said was Tittle. That's the kind of life I've been in. And the phone rings in the middle of the night.
Well, I know.
What do you remember, memories associated with you being in the funeral home, growing up around the funeral home, growing up with death?
I remember being eager to go with my dad to pick up bodies. I remember going on services with my dad all my life. I grew up in the funeral home, around the funeral home. My grandfather started our funeral home. My dad, my uncle, and myself all run it now. But I grew up from a child up to now I'm 40 years old, and I've always been around. I have a son that's 7 years old, is being brought basically the same way. He's been in the funeral home ever since he was in a carrier. And
You go to their house, because theirs was a different type house. But this was normal to me.
Living with death.
Living with death every day.
As we all are, because he was a man as we all are.
It sticks out in my spirit to the day, and I take it to my grave with me. God, help me in here. Help me in here. Brother Brown would come to the Father, and I could hear him saying in there, he said, Brown speaking.
Half the time they didn't know what I was saying. I had an interpreter working with me, but when they cried, I knew why they cried. Now when they laughed, I didn't always know why they laughed, but I knew why they were crying. Emotions don't speak a language. I don't care where you're from, what color you are, how big you are, how ugly you are, emotions are a language.
How do you feel about dying?
First of all,
I know you ain't got a choice. But
First of all, I'd rather not. But the only thing, obviously, I hope it's humane. That when it's time, it's just like throwing a light switch. There's no prolonged anything. As far as the religious side of life, religion and faith is a personal thing between man and his maker. Phone rang about 1 o'clock, and this lady said her mother had died. And I'm gonna tell you this: when I get to heaven, if a damn cell phone goes off, I'm gonna know I'm in hell. I didn't make it, because if there's a cell phone in heaven, it ain't heaven. Okay.
Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. O death, where is your sting? O grave, where is your victory? In Christ alone will I glory, for he has conquered death, hell, and the grave.